Yeah, I think asking yourself really what drives you could be like a very interesting question because that really would help you reflect. And I think sometimes it doesn't have to be what drives you in your job. It could be what drives you in your life. What is it that you find fulfilling when you were a child, or when within your first job, or as you've kept moving on in life, what are these different aspects that you find super fulfilling that is still important for you to see in your new career?
Welcome to Heart of Change podcast, where we explore heroic and inspiring stories of change. In today's episode, we will be diving into the transformative journey of career change with an insightful expert, Fareen Shaik. Fareen is originally from India, living in Berlin, Germany as a career coach. She's the founder of Fareen Shaik, where she empowers both professionals and expats navigating career transitions. With over 14 years of experience in HR, recruitment, and career coaching, Fareen brings a wealth of knowledge and passion to the table. Having worked myself in the career and talent space, I deeply grasp the importance of this topic. Our careers don't just sustain us economically, they profoundly shape our sense of self. In this episode, we'll dive into the various aspects of career change, from practical job hunting tips to the deeper exploration of aligning personal values with professional paths. I look forward to an insightful and fruitful discussion with Fareen, exploring career change and transformation. Fareen, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me a part of your show.
Yeah. So when we think about change, career change is such an important topic. Almost everybody is going through a career change, has gone through a career change. So it's certainly something that I wanted to discuss on Hard to Change podcast. Also, I think you bring a really interesting perspective as someone who's lived in a couple different countries and has worked in this space for some time. So again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get into career change?
It's interesting because my husband and I moved to Germany about 5 years ago. This is the 6th year. And I think from that point on, everything just seemed to change in our lives. So career-wise, I had a completely different career back home. I was an HR professional. I started off with recruitment, did that for about 12 years when I was home, worked for 3 tech organizations. While I did different aspects within the HR vertical, recruitment always seemed to be my constant. So when we moved here, that was also the first natural step career-wise that I took on. I started working for a remote working platform called AceWork as a recruitment head. And that kind of got me the exposure of working with different industries across EU, not necessarily Germany. While I did that, it wasn't as fulfilling as it used to be when I started off. I think back then, in total it would have been 14 years when I actually realized that I needed to make that change. And through that change, I realized that I wanted to do something more fulfilling, wanted to see people grow, and actually support them in areas that I was already familiar in, which was actually recruitment or finding jobs. And as an expat, it was also very different for me to look for opportunities here. So that's when I transitioned into coaching, more from a mindset of supporting people into getting fulfilling jobs in their careers through career change or otherwise.
So it sounds like you went through your own career change and you were seeking something a little more fulfilling, which I feel like is a great birthplace to step into helping others with that same issue.
Absolutely. And I think as you keep moving on in your career, that's often what you're looking for. People chase different things, and I think it's important to really listen to what you're chasing when you're changing. And for me, it was something fulfilling. It was impact. These are some of my values, which I, of course, realized as I was in the change process, that these were aspects that were super important to me. And, that's how I decided, okay, coaching is something that provides both support and impact and growth. And that's how I took on my own journey.
When you say fulfilling, what is it? Just diving into your personal experience a little more, like what was it that constitutes a fulfilling career for you? What were you looking for?
I think it was interesting because when I did recruit before and I did work for these organizations, fulfilling back then was having to get the person in, but also see them grow into leaders eventually. So I think I always had that at the back of my head or mind, I would say. And I think when I took on coaching, it was quite similar, where I was like, okay, I want to kind of support them when they're struggling, especially when they moved countries, right? It's completely different. Things that you would, or I also would do back home was not valid anymore in some sense. So I think for me, fulfilling was taking someone through that journey and really setting the foundation for them to be a little bit more confident in what they want to do. So I think when I started off, which has changed now, but when I started off, it started off with just supporting people in their job search, helping them with their CVs, their interviews, salary negotiations. But now it's a little bit different. I'm part of training, which is into systemic coaching, and I dive a little bit more into, what is it that you really want to do? Ask yourself that. And then for me, having someone through that journey end to end is what is super fulfilling.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a deeper process. Yes. What is it like guiding the candidates through the process when you work for a company versus having your own business and being a career coach?
I think that's a very good question. As someone who represents a company, it's sort of different. You're representing the organization. But I think when I actually work with individuals now, it's a little bit about bringing that perspective. Like, what is it that I did for 14 years as a recruiter to actually help them understand that this is what they're looking for. So while you do want to be able to talk about yourself, you also need to keep their perspective in mind because ultimately they're the ones who want to hire you. People like to work with people they like in the first go. So I think it's really about presenting yourself in the way they would want to see you, which I think I couldn't do that before because, it was very different. Recruitment's always about the one side and the side of the organization. But here I can give them the idea or the understanding of what is on the other side and how do they present themselves, depending on the different jobs that they're applying to.
Yeah, almost like working with a third party removes the bias a little bit.
Yeah.
Because when you go and interview with a company, you're really catering yourself towards that company.
Yeah.
And often you don't do the deep reflection work that you need to find out who you truly are and like what your desires are as a person, and then strategizing.
Yeah, because I think a lot of them would also come with the very common frustrations of, hey, I've applied for so many jobs, the number game, I've applied for 200 jobs, I'm not hearing back. But there's a lot of strategy, right? There's a lot of, how do you present yourself to these 200 companies? How are you looking at them? Who are you talking to? And the different aspects which they wouldn't be aware of. So I think there's a lot of awareness, a lot of knowledge that I bring with me with what I do now from what I did before.
What's the number one reason that you see for career change with most of your clients?
I think it really depends. But I think the most common one is self-fulfillment. Like, as you keep getting more experienced in your careers, you actually realize that it's a little bit more than the money that you make. And I think it could still hold true for a lot of people. But, for some that are making the change would either be like, okay, I need to do something that I'm really happy with. Or I've reached a point in my career that I've realized that I need to upskill, because that's not fulfilling enough anymore because there's no growth. There's, absolutely no way forward. So I think I would say the two most common have been, okay, it needs to be fulfilling. And on the other hand, it needs to be that, okay, I need to upskill. I need to get better at what I'm doing or try something completely different.
I'm curious about what kind of tips you would give your mentees when they come to you for advice on how to make a career change and one that's fulfilling.
I would say start the work from within. I've seen individuals that would just do career changes because someone told them that maybe you should try this career path, while I've worked with people who actually know what their values are So I think there are a lot of interesting exercises that you can try where, you could check for what your values are, what's important to you, where do you see yourself, even organizational standpoint, right? Like, where do you see yourself? What are environments you really thrive in? So I think it's really not about, if you're really going in for the change, it's not about taking up that change because you need that next job, but it's about taking up that change that really aligns with, what you see yourself. It doesn't have to be a 10-year goal. It could just be like, okay, where do you see yourself 2 years from now? Is the steps that you're taking in from understanding your values, understanding environments that you want to work in, is always a good starting point to get you closer to your goal.
Right. I feel like if you can't list out your personal values, then how can you find a company that's a match in terms of their mission statement or what their values are as well?
Yeah.
So that's super important. I'm also curious about skill sets, because often skill sets are things that we acquire, like that we can do and provide the organization, but it's how are those skill sets actually changing you as a person? So for instance, if you want to do more team-oriented work, is that going to make you a more connected person? Or like, how are you going to evolve from taking on these different skill sets? Or like, where do you see yourself in terms of who you're going to become from this position? Do you sort of dive into those questions with your mentees as well?
I think a lot of times when people change careers, they also feel like they're starting out fresh, and that's really not the truth, right? You've come with some skills already from your previous experiences, and usually those are transferable skills, exactly like what you mentioned, working in a team or probably communicating really well. So you could be someone who's really good with presentations, with public speaking, but at the same time, you also are someone who's, good with project management. So I think it's also, when you start from within, you also check what you come in with so that you don't feel like you're starting out fresh. But it's always rooted to sort of, where you see yourself in the future and what is it that you bring with you. So I do exercises with them, really trying to understand, okay, what is it that you did in your past job that you really enjoyed? What is it that comes really easy to you? What is it that your manager would delegate to you? So I think these are all important questions to look within, that you do have your own sort of repository that you come with, and it's then about channeling it to, your future career.
I see that there's a shift into organizations focusing more on skill sets versus being so tied to the role's title. Have you seen that? How real is that?
That's actually quite interesting, especially in Berlin, because you come into an environment which is so multicultural. So I think while companies would say, okay, in a developer or in a designer, I would require someone to have these tech skills, for example, it doesn't stand to that point anymore, right? Because you're bringing in people from all over the world with completely different cultures, and then it goes into those fine soft skills or interpersonal skills that one brings with them. So I think I've seen that shift more and more in companies where they understand diversity or cultural sensitivities in ways to kind of bring people together. So I think hard skills is important, but I've seen companies now shifting towards understanding how much of soft skills or cultural diversity trainings become more important for people to be having more sustainable careers in that organization that they work for.
I've also seen a lot of creative sourcing strategies where people look at, for instance, the military professionals that have a more broad-based skill set, and then provide some training to kind of hone in on where they want to leverage that person.
Yeah.
Do you see more training programs being developed by these companies in order to, give the right types of training to people that have skill sets but maybe aren't the exact fit for the role?
I've actually seen companies seeking for coaches outside or trainers outside of their current team to come step in. I don't know, maybe do a leadership coaching or a soft skill coaching or a cultural coaching session or training with individuals from their organization. So I've seen that shift where it doesn't always have to be internal, but bringing in someone from an outside perspective also sort of changes the way organizations function.
I think that's a smart idea,
Yeah,
to just be leveraging more third parties to have an unbiased perspective and come in and provide that training where needed.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the major changes you're seeing in just the workforce, the paradigm of the workforce?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the remote working platform that I worked for when I moved here was remote before COVID. And at that point, we were really struggling to find organizations that knew what fully remote organizations do, setting up their cultures or having a hybrid setup. And then COVID happened and everything changed. Every organization, because everyone started working remotely, some of them actually realized that this is what fits for them, personality wise, work culture wise. And I think the shift that I've seen over time has been into remote work or the flexibility. So allowing employees to, come in a few days a week or just not come in at all. Like my husband has been working for 2 remote organizations for the past 2 years. They don't have an office. They've been fully remote, but they function well. The business makes money. So I think there's been a lot of remote work, flexibility, allowing employees to be able to travel the world and work from anywhere, which is, I think, really cool if someone, especially again in Berlin, right? Like you have people from different cultures, they always want to go back home, spend time with their family, and why not do that with your work? So yeah, I've seen that to be a shift.
Interesting. I think Microsoft, after COVID, went fully virtual.
Yes, and they did come back as well with, I think Google and Microsoft, most of these organizations did for a very long time post-COVID as well, try to stay remote. But yeah, that's changed over a period of time to more hybrid setup or more remote work flexibility. And I think that's important, right? Like really understanding the world has changed, people have changed, their values have changed, for example. And how do you really incorporate that into their work-life balance?
How do you think having a flexible workforce is going to affect mental health?
I think it's important, right? I think when people have their own awareness around what is it that really drives them, and if flexibility does, and if organizations want to keep talent, for maybe their hard skills or even their soft skills, I think that's what it's going to be for the years to come. And it should be that way because there has been, a time during COVID that people have realized a lot of things. Organizations have too. So I think it's just about blending it all in together.
Yeah. What about people that like going in the office? Do you think this is going to have a negative impact on their mental health?
No, and I think, that's what people need. There are some set of people that say, okay, for me, flexibility, or I'm more productive when I don't have anyone around me, but for some people who are very extroverted, social, they need those, water cooler conversations to keep them going. So I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think it's about for an organization to also find that middle ground on how do you cater to organizations that have a blend of both these set of people with completely different styles of work. Right. So yeah, I think it's quite interesting that we've reached a point in people's lives or careers where you're allowed to ask for it or shift careers because you feel like flexibility is what you want. But yeah, I think it's really okay if someone says I want to go into work 5 days a week because I don't know, maybe I have kids at home, and that takes me away from my work boundary to my home boundary.
Yeah, I think creating that flexibility is also creating a more individualized approach,
exactly. Yeah.
Which is so important. And I think it's hard to do, actually, because I've noticed in different types of paradigms and corporate structures that there isn't always a career model for every single kind of person.
Yeah.
And how do you think we are going to mitigate that in the future? Have you seen a lot of change with how we're having an individualized approach to hiring?
Organizations have realized that the talent pool that they're really looking for are individuals that seek a lot of flexibility. That's often going to be the path that they have to take, So I think it's a little bit of understanding what the job market is like. And we always did that as recruiters, right? Like we would always have hiring managers tell us, okay, these are 5 things that we need in a person. And then you go to the market and you realize that doesn't exist, but there are 5 other things with what the market has to offer. So there needs to be, kind of really questioning the system and then changing that to be able to build something that works both ways.
Some of the HR reviews, like year-end reviews, and also different career tracks that companies offer have been quite limiting. I believe we need more individualized approach to assessing our employees and providing options for them to flourish. And it can become very convoluted and difficult to know when to leave an organization because you're reaching a ceiling or you're capped out, or if there is sort of a creative option for someone. What are your thoughts around that, around sort of these like limiting paradigms, and like when should someone know to leave their position?
Yeah, I think, and again, there are many reasons for why someone would leave their position, right? One, it could be monetary, because I think that's important. Sometimes people just work for money, and that's okay too. But sometimes people also, like I said, feel like skills aren't at the level that it should be. The market's looking for something completely different, and you realize that, okay, you need these 3 more skills to kind of upskill yourself. And on the other hand, like my journey, where I felt like, okay, this is interesting, I'm good at recruitment, I can get the job done, but I need something more, and impact was not only about placing people within roles, but it was really seeing them through that journey from when they're completely lost to actually taking them through that to that place rather, where they've got their next job, So I think it's the impact, the fulfillment that one can take through. So it looks different for different people. Again, not really making it right or wrong.
I think asking these questions before you reach like a point, right? Like I know from my personal experience, I wish I had engaged in more in-depth and individualized conversations around my career about 5 years before I left my last company, because I saw myself needing growth in certain aspects where it wasn't to the fault of anyone. It just, perhaps I had outgrown whatever situation I was in, and there was another path for me. But a lot of people, they don't know to even ask the questions. Are there simple questions that people that maybe they're starting to feel like they need a change, but they don't really know what that change is? Are there simple questions that they can ask if they're not able to engage with a career coach such as yourself? Like what kinds of things can they ask themselves at home?
Yeah, I think asking yourself really what drives you could be like a very interesting question, because that really would help you reflect. And I think sometimes it doesn't have to be what drives you in your job. It could be what drives you in your life. What is it that you find fulfilling when you were a child, or, when within your first job, or as you've kept moving on in life, what are these different aspects that you find super fulfilling that is still important for you to see in your new career? Yeah, so I think the driving question always helps. There are also a lot of tools online where, you can look at a list of values. Like I remember doing an exercise with a coach of mine where she was like, okay, this is a list of values, pull out what you think you resonate with, and then give the same sheet to like your partner to see whether he can see the values that you resonate with. Do you actually, show it in your day-to-day life? So that also sort of gives you perspective. So you could also do this in a very low threshold way where, you have someone who's really close to you, who sort of supports you and understands you and knows you, to kind of list down values that you emit. And then you can see where and how you could bring that in your life or in your career. So change, I think career is definitely a huge part of it. But I think when you change, your career change also changes you personally. You've started to see things a lot more differently that you kind of bring with you in all aspects.
Yeah. I think, and not everybody, but a lot of people, they, take a job out of school, and for instance, say maybe they're doing accounting or they're doing journalism, whatever it is, and you're just getting tangible skills and learning how to work, and then they go so much time in their career and realize like, this isn't really, I'm not passionate about this, I don't like to do this, and a lot of people feel trapped. They feel like, okay, I have bills to pay, I have a family, how am I going to make a career change, and what change would I make if I'm going to make a career change? So what would you say to someone like that? They know they're not fulfilled. They've done their list of values, and they realize it's not being met in that job, but they're very intimidated, or they don't really know where to go. How would you navigate that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in speaking to people generally. So, you always start with people that you already have around you. Someone's had a career change. It's not uncommon anymore that someone hasn't ever had a career change. I think it's starting through these small conversations, seeing within your set of people or community who's done it, how is it that they've done it, and seeking, a little bit of a foundation from that. If you are in Germany, you also have a lot of benefits, right? If you've been in the workforce for a while, you do have the job center that actually supports you with coaching, which is free. You need to get a voucher, and I kind of work a lot with these individuals that are seeking change or just ourselves unemployed at this point. So I think you could also just seek for help if you feel like monetary doesn't allow you to do it. You could go through the job center, get a coaching voucher, and get started. So you don't also have to do this alone. And these are things like I feel that is sort of a blessing that I wouldn't have got that back home in India. So, when you don't have that at home and when you see it happening here, I would say that you can also always start from within. You talk to people, but if you do have a system around you, a government system that supports you, why not leverage on it?
A lot of people also come to re-examine what work means.
Yeah.
So, maybe they don't want to work Monday through Friday full time anymore, but they still, of course, need to support themselves. So I see a trend of a lot of digital streams of income, or people working in entrepreneurship in some unique or creative ways, or they leave and start a restaurant or a business or something like that because they realize they don't want to be in that sort of older paradigm of what work is.
Yeah.
Do you see a big shift in the definition of what work is, and how would you advise someone that's I just don't want that paradigm?
Yeah. I think it's okay, right? If you know for sure that that's not something that drives you any more than what does. So if that is having a part-time job, but being able to at the side figure out what life looks for you, otherwise that's okay as well. And I think that's how I also started. I had a part-time job, and then I volunteered as a coach to really understand whether is this for me. I spoke to a lot of coaches, and these were not coaches just from Germany. They were just coaches in different streams and niches of their own to really understand how is it and what is it that they do, what keeps them going. So I think it is definitely an interesting path to also go and ask yourself, okay, what is it that you want to do? And you can have multiple streams. I've spoken to coaches before that would coach, have their own business, but have programs that they would sell, which would be automated online. So you could really decide. I know a lot of people that say that, okay, while I do have a job of my own, I love to be on TikTok. That comes more naturally to me. I give book reviews and then make some money out of that as well. So there's really, again, no right or wrong way to do it, but just really understanding, how do you want to pay your bills in one way, and what on the other hand could be completely your passion project, and that could eventually get you some money in. So there are different ways that one can do that.
There's new ways.
There are new ways, yeah.
Absolutely. And I come from, of course, an older mentality of no breaks in your resume, and you need to stay in the same career for many, many years. So I've been learning to kind of, as I'm in the midst of a career change, is letting go of some of these old ideologies and being just open, just simply being open to new ideas, because I think that is so important, especially in Europe. I've noticed taking sabbaticals and taking time and doing career shifts is very different than the country. I'm from the United States, so the thought process is a little bit different there if you were embedded in sort of the corporate world. And I find that really refreshing, is that it's okay. It's okay to take time to explore different things, and that's becoming more common. I think especially after the pandemic, people are they're working more virtual. Their mental health is very important, and people are really listening to their inner self.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the most common questions that I get asked, especially with career changers, especially with mothers who've also taken their break. They would be like, okay, but I took a break for 2 years or 5 to take care of my kids. And I would also always tell them, put that on your resume, talk about it, right? That's what you did. You picked up so many other skills, and you need to be able to talk about those things, because that's really what's made you now. People travel, and I think with travel, they do their small jobs, but at the same time, they get so much of cultural sensitivity, which I think maybe a workplace wouldn't be able to give you, right? So why not talk about it? So I think, like you said, it should be normalized, and it is getting normalized. So why not work towards that direction? If you need to take a break, take a break.
Take a break, yeah. And I think the vulnerability piece is so important. Just as a society, we're realizing how important vulnerability is to our mental health. And if we can't be vulnerable with our employer or in our workspace, it's probably taking from us and not giving to us.
Yeah. And that's probably when you should leave.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good. So I'm curious about the 4-day work week. I think it's, is it Belgium that has started implementing it, or?
One of the European countries, yes. I cannot remember myself. Yeah, but Germany also started that very briefly. Like I did, because I do freelance with a lot of organizations. So I do remember one of my partners did the 4-day week, and that didn't really work out so much for them. So I think it hasn't reached Germany as much as it has maybe in the Scandinavian countries or Belgium for that matter as well. But I think it's really good, because I think especially in Europe, very different from India. In India, culturally, we've been always told to kind of identify yourself with the work that you do. And when you come here, you actually realize that it's really not about work. It's about who you are individually, how you spend time with your family, what you do outside of work is equally important than what you do at work. So I think it's quite a change that the world is seeing at the moment. And I think how remote work is bloomed at this point, that would probably be the next thing, the 4-day work week.
4-day work week. Yeah, I know some companies you can work more hours like Monday through Thursday and take Friday off. So if you have a family, you have that flexibility as well.
Absolutely.
I think it's a great option. Like maybe not everybody has to do it, but like that we have options is really important. It's just, to me, it's worrisome because we get so stuck in these systems that it's very hard to individualize things. And I think that a lot of companies don't want to invest the money and the time into the employees in this way. Have you seen that, or do you see the employers being pretty like flexible?
Yeah, I think I've seen that change over time. So I've seen very rigid organizations saying that, okay, this is a system that worked for us before. It needs to work like this now. But I've also seen that gradually change because people leave organizations, give feedback about what's not really working, and then they realize that they're actually losing their workforce, and it takes them double the time to find someone. So I've seen,
more expensive.
Yeah, it's more expensive. It's more time consuming for a lot of people involved in the recruitment process, right? So I've seen that change. I wouldn't say that we're 100% there, but like I would say that we're now better with remote work, but maybe not yet there with a 4-day week where you can work for 4 days but get paid for 5 days, I think a lot of people here would go into the 4-day week, take that pay cut, but I think we eventually will get there where it is a 4-day week and you get paid for 5 days.
I almost think it's vital or very important for someone who's a job seeker to be asking the right questions, like
Absolutely.
asking what are your company's values, what is your mission statement, and having them back it up. Like have the company give some examples on are they really, if they say that, oh, we believe in sustainability, are they doing sustainable actions?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that, about like good questions that job seekers can ask employers?
I think I've worked with a lot of people from underrepresented group, women of color, and I think for them, what stays in the focus is diversity. So it's going in with questions like, okay, what are your diversity policies? How has that changed in the past few years? Can you give me examples? Because it is about examples, right? It's one thing to put it up on your website and say, oh, this is what we do, but you should be able to talk about what your next 2 years growth would look like. And I've seen that change in organizations where they also have now diversity and inclusion teams, which is great. And you need that in an international environment. So I would also always ask them, what are your values? What is it that is the closest to you that you would see or want to see in organizations? But I would also ask them to ask questions like, what is challenging in this role? What does the first 6 months or a year look like? And for a lot of people, feedback is important. So like, how do you give feedback? How do you know that I'm going to be good at my job? One of the questions that I've also seen interviewers get out of their skin is by really asking them what keeps them going in the organization, where you can actually see that, okay, is this job really sparking them joy, sort of a thing. I try to also help them think about, okay, how is it that you're going to understand your hiring manager or your team members? So asking the right question always, is when they understand the company better or the culture better.
Yeah, asking the right questions. And I like that idea of actually asking your interviewer specifically about their experience and kind of digging in a little bit to see how much they really enjoy working for the company. That's a great one because at least in my experience, a lot of these companies, they pitch mental health and they pitch DEI, but when you sit on these calls, it's so high level. It's like, come on, you talk about mental health, but how vulnerable can we really be on these calls? No one feels comfortable really talking about their issues. I mean, I have seen a surge of people on LinkedIn, for instance, starting to open up. Like my friend and I used to talk about it a lot. Like, wow, it's becoming more like Facebook, and people are really talking about that a family member had cancer or that they're dealing with a layoff. I mean, there's a lot of really vulnerable pieces coming out because I think people are hungry for that. And I actually think they're not getting it from a lot of these employers. Like the employers pitch it, but then it's high level when you're on the calls.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also kind of probe a lot of my clients to actually ask them leadership related questions because I think, when you've made that change, you want to also be in an environment that fosters that change. And I think, asking questions around what is your leadership style? And then really reflecting on, is this something that you want to be in as part of the system? I've been in toxic environments. It can change the way you feel. And I think that also becomes really important to go in with that mindset, right? Like the person in the team that you're actually speaking with, are they setting that environment for you to thrive in?
Right. I wish I had more confidence when I was younger in my career because I think it's also important for you to remember that you're interviewing the company. The company isn't just interviewing you. I mean, I wish I had stood up and said, this is what I believe in terms of mental health and DEI issues, and this is what I expect from an employer, and then, turn it on them as well. And if they can't, show you examples of how they might aid what you need done, then maybe they're not the right company, or perhaps you can even be spearheaded. That's something that you want to bring to the company, which I think could be a great selling point in your interview as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think if you come from a place of passion, but also experience, if you've done this before and you feel like you can, of course, I mean, I also always say, interviews are like a business deal. At the end of it, it needs to be win-win for both parties, the organization as well as the candidate. So I think it's mostly about just finding that common ground of, okay, how is it that both parties are going to benefit? So why not talk about something that you feel, like you said, spearhead new projects or new policies that could change maybe small ways, team cultures, and then see how that develops into something larger.
Right. And I think when we talked about values, which is so important in being aligned with the company's values, with your own values, it's also like intention.
Yeah.
So going in with my intention is not only to get a position, but my intention is to become someone that's connected and is working on a team that's doing something for humanity or has a broader footprint, if that's what your thing is. It's like being very clear about what your intention is, not just as an employee, but as a person, and making sure that alignment's there. Because I feel like if your intention's not aligned, it's like building a house on quicksand. It's not going to stay built.
Yeah, and it's more frustrating. It's often frustrating when you take up jobs because you feel like you need to take one and you've not done the work and you've not understand where they come from. I mean, I think it's cool that, here you have your 6 months probation, so both parties have enough time to figure that out. But I feel like, if within those 6 months, if you're not able to figure it out and you continue in that grind, you're just going to be so much more frustrated when you get back into your job search. So as much as you can kind of figure this out, it's even better. I usually also tell my clients during an interview, if you sense a red flag, it's okay to question it. It's okay to walk away from opportunities or interviews that you feel you don't see yourself in, instead of just pushing yourself through it again. So it just doesn't make sense anymore. So if you do have a red flag from someone you think is your boss or the team, just walk away.
Yeah, there's always a way. I think we feel trapped often. Like we need to make money, we have to take this job. But I mean, listen, it might not be the best job, it might not be what you want, but you can always find work doing something while you figure it out.
Yeah.
We don't have to feel like the world is caving in and there aren't options, because there are options, right?
Yeah.
So it's good to remind people that.
Yeah, something I kind of also tell myself, especially when I'm going through change or, in a very difficult situation, I always tell myself that life figures. It always does. While you feel like it's not working out at this point, just give yourself the space and just tell yourself that, okay, life's going to figure it out, and eventually it all makes sense.
Works out. Yeah. I read something the other day that says the universe is working for you, not against you.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're being pushed out of things because you're being pushed towards things in life. And that's a great energy space to step into, right? Because it's very positive. Change just isn't comfortable, right? Like, people don't always like change unless they choose it.
Yeah.
It can be really unnerving, but most of the time you become something very interesting.
Very interesting.
Right? Like, when you look back on your life, you're like, okay, so I did a totally different career. Or I went to this company and maybe that didn't work out, or maybe this wasn't right, but look what I became from it.
Yeah.
And I sort of evolved
Yeah.
to this really interesting person. So just don't be afraid of the change. What about diversity? When you look at companies and DEI initiatives, like, how do you sort of prep your mentees, the people that you coach, to step into a company, especially like expats or people from other countries?
I think it's really important to start again with them, right? Like, what does diversity mean to you? Like, what's really important? What is an ideal organization? Like, for example, a lot of people who are Indians would like to have Indian team members. So really seeing the ratio of what that would look like, and it could be the same for different cultures. So I think it really starts with the person, like what does diversity look like for you? What does the company that you're applying to, how important is it, right? Because you could have a manager from a completely different culture and it would work, but a manager who does have sensitivity about your culture, it works better with them. Yeah, so I think it's really important about understanding that, and then really going into interviews, asking them, because a lot of organizations do have diversity on their main focus. So they talk about that on their social media, but they also talk about that in their interviews. So yeah, I think it's really important about what matters to you the most, and then going in with that.
Having a clear understanding.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in terms of like language? Because as someone who is very light on German skills and has been living in Germany for a couple of years, I know that can be a hardship for some people, especially when there's like shifts in management, or the company realigns like the territories it's covering. When you live in Europe, that can be a big deal. It can change your position.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's tough. I think it's so underrated how someone feels about this. I mean, I come from India. We know we have so many languages, and these languages were something that we were ingrained or born into as we grew up. And then when we move here, we have to work with German, which is a very difficult language. And some people are able to do it, some people not so much. But I have seen, we had like this alumni panel. I work at a university, so we had an alumni panel who was also Indian, and he had been in Germany for the past 10 years. And he was like, there were no jobs before that were in English, and now it's changed so much where at least you can find a job, of course, in some cities more than the others. So I see that shift changing as well, that, at least now they're a little bit more considerate that, okay, they come from completely different backgrounds, completely different languages that they would speak. And if your focus or your primary work language can shift to English, then why not do it? Because that just makes it easier to integrate people.
But does it affect upward mobility? Because I feel like and rightfully so, you're in a home country. I think some of the leadership roles really require you to be bilingual, for sure.
Yeah.
It's something that I didn't really consider when I was coming over here, because I was coming over here really to take a break a bit.
Yeah.
It's more like take a sabbatical and to maybe start some of my own projects. But I realized quickly that, like, really you need to know German in a bilingual sense.
I mean, the truth is that the job market changes, right? Like, if you are a German speaker, not necessarily native, but if you speak German, the job market looks very different, which means leadership positions also are more than, someone who could just speak English. But I've seen that change. Like, my manager at this point is German, but our primary language is English, so we have to switch to English to make those decisions and have conversations at work. But I've seen it, and you've seen expats here in Germany as well, right? They might not be that many in number, but I don't know, maybe I'm just a positive person, so I just feel like everything's changing. And I've seen women in leadership roles. I've seen women that are not necessarily bilingual, but only speak English to be successful. So I feel like if I had to look back at it when I came, it looked completely different. And I now see a lot of shifts. Maybe we're not there 100%, but I would believe that there's still hope.
It was difficult to get a visa to come here, and I think it would be really beautiful for us to open up sort of the visa stipulations and allow workers from other countries or globally, because it really enriches a workforce to have such diversity. I know that it can be difficult to go from some countries to others, and I wish we could like loosen that up or open that up. Do you see that changing as well?
Actually, Germany's done quite a bit recently, especially like in India now you have like a point system where you could just move quite easily through, if you do have, you know, certain credentials, you have more eligibility to move, and it's getting easier. But I think what we need to do a little bit better is removing or getting away or easing out on the German language. So I think we're still far away from that, but I see that shift happen a little bit. Where, you know, you can get people from other countries, but then if you put them in environments where you're forced to speak German very quickly, it's quite demotivating. So there is a lot of frustration, and that's the truth. It exists, but I also feel like it might change. You know, I've seen it change. I've spoken to someone who's also been here 10 years and said that there has been a change. So I feel like if you're getting in people from other cultures, it has to change.
Right. Yeah. I think if we stick to what's important in terms of really validating, having a healthy, diverse workforce, having more individualized approach with the people that are coming in, and create more outlets for like a creative mindset or creativity. If we stick to the core things that are important, collectively, that things will change better, because everything takes time. But it's more like, are we realigning to like our kind of core truths on what needs to happen within the workforce? Okay, I want to read this because I think it's really interesting. The World Economic Forum's The Future of Jobs report from 2020 predicts that 85 million jobs will be replaced by AI in 2025. 85 million jobs will be replaced, but it could generate 97 million jobs, but different. There'll be different types of jobs. Yeah. So I want to touch on AI. It's such a big subject. And where do we start here? What are your thoughts around AI and the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, I actually do love AI, you know, and I use that a lot in my coaching. You know, I like to create workshops, helping people with prompts, especially in their job search. I think I'm not sure how much or how many jobs would it replace, but I feel like it's at this point a tool that actually supports you to get better at your job. You know, your productivity can increase. You can find, or, you know, people who used to struggle with writing content before in their CVs and their cover letters or drafting their interview stories now can use AI to do that. It's just that you kind of need to apply yourself. You know, it's not about using AI to kind of get you that end result, but it's about putting yourself in for it to kind of support you in what you're looking for. So I don't really know what jobs would come in, but I just still feel like people-centric jobs would still need people. You know, I don't think you're ever going to be able to take that off. But that's how all our revolutions happened, right? Like from our first to the fourth, when the internet broke out, you know, there were jobs that shifted and people adapted. So everyone often always gets scared of like, oh my God, AI is going to take my job. But
it's going to take over the world.
Yeah, but maybe AI makes a lot of things easier, right? And it gives you new skills to work with. So I'm actually quite excited. I don't really know what the future holds, but when I look at it, I'm like, oh, okay, there's something new that could make life easier or could make life better or different. So why not?
So what tools is there a specific tool for resume writing that you recommend?
Yeah, so I do really like this website called Resume Worded. And there's also a website called Teal. And they both have a great combination of LinkedIn, but CV reviews, and it's quite interesting. So usually I would also always tell my clients, why don't you look into it? And we come back and talk about it, because, you could have an AI tool that matches your CV with the job ad, but at the end of the day, a person's going to be interviewing you, right? So I can bring in the human perspective. Google also has something that's called Product Up, I believe, which is an interviewing tool. So, you get a couple of questions that get thrown onto you, you record yourself, and then it gives you feedback. And I think these are really cool things, because there was a time that you had to constantly tell people, find someone to practice with. Now you have tools to do that, right? So it's really about, there's no one to judge, because it's you in, a closed space, recording yourself, it's giving you feedback. So why not, if that helps you? But then I feel like, this can only prepare you a little bit when you still have to practice with a person. So I think that's when coaches sort of step in and say, okay, we can do a mock with you to see how that works, but you always will have tools that kind of can get you a little bit better than what you were before.
Right. And I think it's good to think of things on your own first,
Yeah.
and then leverage the tool. Because I know at times I've used like ChatGPT for questions, and it comes up, if I've done it first, it'll come up with almost the same questions many times, but then like it'll add to it, or it'll make them like more robust, those questions. But sometimes it's just not the way I would say it. Like it has none of my personality in it, or I wouldn't form it that way. So it doesn't feel genuine. So it can be a good ad, but I feel like you don't want to then become the robot, and like you don't have your own personality. Then you're not selling your own personality.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're going to the plate.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, right? You need to step in. It's a tool that can support you. So if you're someone who kind of struggles with content, you use it now to make better content, but you still add your personal stories to it. You add your tone. Because I think recruiters can see through that, okay, this is something that's been generated online. So you need to also be very mindful of how much of you is in each of these documents. And I think once you've mastered that part, I think it becomes a lot easier.
It's almost like having a handshake with AI. Like you want it to be a relationship, not a dictatorship.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And in that, you want to have a healthy relationship with that tool. I also saw on the employer side that, they are using AI to remove bias from resumes too. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, but I'm not sure if it's here so much. Like I know in the US, you wouldn't put your picture, or it blur out your name. They blur out the candidate's name, and it just comes as a document. I haven't seen that so much here yet, but I guess that's the future, right?
Yeah. I was also looking at some of the jobs that, due to AI, like might change. Is it some of these like data processing jobs that people take right out of school? Like those are the things that maybe AI could take over. So that's when it says that 97 million new jobs might be like coming to the surface. I'm just guessing, I'm brainstorming here. Would those be jobs that are working in conjunction with AI? Or do you think it would be, I also was thinking maybe it'd be like take us more into a creative state. Things that, yes, AI can be creative, but it's missing the soul.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts around those points?
I don't know. I think you may have already noticed, but there are job ads that talk about your experience with AI. And it's there now as part of the job description. So I think it's not you don't have to be like a prompt engineer, but if you've, within your own sphere or vertical of work, if you've ever worked with AI, that's already a plus, because that cuts down your productivity time, your efficiency time, and it makes you more productive. So I think it's how well you use these tools. And I think we're starting with that at the moment. And then we'll see where that goes.
Right. So you say like become friendly with AI and add that to your skill set.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or your resume, and anything you can contribute there is probably going to.
Yeah, because now if you look at any product, like if you use a Canva, it has an AI tool, so as a designer, if you're able to use that already, that's a plus. Yeah. So I think if you within your work already figure out whether you can use AI, how you bring those skills into your work, it just supports the team even better, because you're kind of now 2024 updated.
Yeah, you're becoming like
Yeah,
like,
you're
updated with
exactly.
with the AI tool. Are there any just like sort of as we close out the conversation today, are there any just pointers or tips? A lot of people are have just gone through a layoff. They're in this sort of like the pains of change when it comes to career. Like, what advice would you give them?
I think something that I experienced a lot was the imposter syndrome during my change, and I think that's going to happen. I think you feel like you want to make these bold changes, but you do have a voice in your head that would often pull you down. And I think it's really about just pushing through that and being true to yourself, because you've made a decision, you're doing the work, you're moving forward, and that could look different for different people. Like, how do you really track success in your career change? So it could start with like just journaling, writing a list of accomplishments, and this kind of also helped me. And I thought that change would be easy, but it's not. So I think for anyone that's making that career change, actually having your self-care routines, having motivational systems, people to speak with, people who understand you really well, so that when you are feeling these moments, you can pick up and keep moving forward. So I think my tip would be to just be easy on yourself, because it is going to be hard, but it's going to be so fulfilling,
Yes, it's so true. I think when we're becoming something else, whatever it is in life, we expect like to snap our fingers and we're there, or that it's going to be perfect, and we don't really understand that the becoming process is imperfect. You put one foot in front of the other, and you just move forward. Everybody has that imposter syndrome. Everybody feels imperfect at the beginning, but that's how you grow.
And you'll be so proud of yourself. Sometimes when I look back now, I'm nothing like what I did when I started off, and that feels so empowering sometimes. So I think just giving yourself that space, that it is what it is, and when you move away from these emotions, you'll find yourself to be a completely different person, a person that you're actually proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really wonderful talking with you today.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to do career change. I think, again, so many people deal with this change. This is a really big one. So it was great to have this discussion with you. It was really insightful. I think people will get a lot of wonderful tools and resources to navigate their career change. So
thank you for having me, Holly.
If you liked this episode with Fareen Shaik today, please be sure to like and subscribe. There were some great pointers around career change, and I'd love to bring you additional content just like this.